I think it would be great if we could be the marketing company for people when they think of tabletop games publishing or even games publishing, not because we have so much experience doing this, but also because we do it ourselves. We publish our own games. Many on the team are actively developing their own projects or have. So that's something that makes us really unique and able to understand our client's position in terms of their thoughts and struggles. And then also our network. We're able to kind of connect our clients with our network because we've worked with so many different people in the industry that we can sort of vouch for and vet.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I'm joined as always by Sean. What should we call you? I'm thinking of, you need a better name. I feel like Sexy Irish Sean could come back.
Or oh no, please don't.
Anyway, on this episode, we kind of wanted to get into, so Sean and I were talking about, so we have our series that we've been working, which is, or running, which is, kind of the before, during, and after Kickstarter is a lot of the emphasis of what it is that we talk about on our podcast. And we've been going through a series that is literally what you should do in a year before Kickstarter, 6 months before Kickstarter, 3 months, and, the week before, and then the, 24 hours before. And we're kind of at the stage where we need to talk about, now that your campaign's live and you get into you need to kind of prepare for the mid-campaign slump, which is a thing. And I actually requested that we would talk about another topic that is, I think, relevant, especially now in my own life, in our company, and in my Lowen Games, with my board game publishing business. And the topic at hand is a pit stop. So in, I don't know, what is it? Formula One or NASCAR or whatever, you've got, you're racing on a track, doing a bunch of left turns down a track, a bunch of laps down on a track, and your tires wear out and other things go wrong, and you need a pit stop to have your crew work on your car so that you can drive it the rest of the race. And there's a lot of tactics and strategy to that, and there's some really great movies, especially about Formula One, that are that have come out. And I kind of actually started to think about taking a pit stop when I had a conversation yesterday with my Deliverance team, my Lowen Games team, about, all of us were working very hard, but are we working on the right things? Are we all pulling in the same direction? Is the direction we're pulling even the way that we kind of want to go for our company? And those types of conversations are very big. And then on the Crowdfunding Nerds side, we had a time where a week ago, we all met together in person. Some people met for the first time. Ryan came from China. Sean came from Northern Ireland. And everybody came from, everywhere else in between. The only person that couldn't make it was Jacob. So he had to stay in Kentucky and keep working on client stuff. But it was a pit stop of a sort for our company. And I thought that there would be a lot of really valuable lessons for the people listening to this that we could kind of pull from this. And that it's not the type of topic that you can just talk about off the cuff, but it's more of a thing that we really need to strike while the iron is hot. And that's kind of why I asked Sean if we could take a pit stop from our Kickstarter conversations, and our timing to discuss what I think is a vastly underconsidered topic that really kind of has a significant impact on publishers, especially newer publishers who are not very well established, and can also have a pretty dramatic effect on the longevity of your business. So publishers who are seasoned should also consider. So that's kind of the setting the stage, but maybe I should just get right into it. But you have any thoughts or comments before I jump in?
Yeah, I suppose it's maybe to summarize the overall theme, it's how to move forward with your company or business, particularly if you've just created a game. I think the age-old question is, do you create another game in the same world that you just created? Do you do it in the same theme, or do you completely change direction, have a completely new theme? And do you create something that your audience or your fans want, or you think your fans want, or you just create something that you want because you have passion about that? So maybe those are some of the things we can discuss.
Yeah, and some on that topic, there are some things that I would say are more like um maybe common sense, which may or may not be good. It just because they're, I don't want to say common sense, common knowledge. And when something becomes common knowledge, it may actually be outdated knowledge. If everybody knows it, then like everybody used to say, oh, you need miniatures in your game if you want to make more money. And that is something that when it became common for people to say that, especially for fans of games to say that, it was actually something that was far outdated, and that people are kind of in some ways rebelling against large campaigns full of plastic, and that I have 12 of those that I have to paint already. I don't need a 13th. So the I think innovation sometimes is kind of going uh, outside of what I would consider common knowledge. But there are some things that I think are very tried and true. One of them is, if you make a game that is popular and successful, whatever version that is for you, that it deserves an expansion, or it deserves, in particular, a continuation. So you need to probably have a way that product gets more content. And so we could just talk about that first. I mean, that's a very good one. So you have, so especially for publishers that had one product that is like their baby, or one line of products that is very popular and kind of the cornerstone of your company. A lot of times these are called evergreen products. You need to support those evergreen products. And from what I like, one example of a game a lot of us know is Heat, Pedal to the Metal. They had, in their original design, they had two expansions planned. I think it's two, because like you had up to 8 slots for race cars in the original box. So you could tell that they planned on 2 expansions right when the first game was released. But when they saw the success of Heat, they're like, well, we're definitely not going to be stopping expansions anytime soon, because these things make a lot of money. And so they released additional expansions where there's a 9th race car already that doesn't fit in the base game box. And and I know that because I bought the expansion that has the 9th car that doesn't fit in the base game box. And so you should continue supporting your project. I think that Deliverance, for myself, that's was a really easy one, where Deliverance was successful in 2021. We had 2,700 backers, then it raising 300,000, 314,000, $375, but who's counting? And then we went to Kickstarter with an expansion several years later, which did very well, just over 500,000. And we're thinking, as a Deliverance team, well, we obviously need to make more Deliverance content. But the question for us is, like, after the first expansion, which I believe, by the way, the first expansion that you make to your product that was successful, I think you should just give people more of the same. And maybe, with like for Deliverance, it was easy because I didn't have to really add in some crazy new mechanics, even though there were certain like new status effects. There were the big thing was new characters. People wanted to play new characters. They didn't need like the rules of the game to change. They just needed the same rules that they loved, with new content to experience in that same kind of rule set. That is probably the most um, common knowledge, or whatever, that I would advocate for. I think that that's also common sense. Um, so I don't know. What do you what do you think about that, Sean?
Yeah, and I suppose you also surveyed your audience, which is something we always recommend, and that gives you an idea. I know that a lot of people wanted you to focus on story, so that's something that you've actively tried to uh, change with the expansion, or kind of put more an emphasis on. So I think that's always helpful, especially with crowdfunding. You have this email list, you have this audience that you can leverage for your future products, and I think involving your community in moving forward, because they're ultimately your customers, I think is worthwhile. We've all seen these videos of Blizzard announcing new games which fall flat because they didn't involve their audience. They built a a customer base that was used to a certain type of game, and then they try to throw a curveball and it falls flat. So sometimes I think game developers think they know the audience, but sometimes it's just better to just ask the audience and see what they think.
Yeah, especially as you kind of get it becoming a more advanced in age company like Blizzard. You really need to make sure you keep your ear to the ground because your fans change and people evolve in interests, and also, like for example, Deliverance or even World of Warcraft. When both of those games came out, the end game content was really hard for players, and now players are more seasoned and they need more challenging content. You needed, back in the day in World of Warcraft, you could just have a boss that punched really hard and put fire on the ground and people would die. It's like, oh no, I'm on fire, dead. All the healers would just run to the fire, be like, not have any idea what to do. And nowadays it's like, there's fire on the ground. Don't step in it. And the tank gets punched hard. So have dedicated healers healing him. And you really need other kind of mechanics that are like, that add some variance. And gosh, for like mythic raids in World of Warcraft, there are some fights that have like 25 different mechanics that are happening in a fight that might take you uh several weeks to figure out, but like the best guilds are doing this within like the first week. It's pretty wild, but the amount of like additional like stressors that you need to put on your players that are very seasoned is way different than noob players. And so for Deliverance, I think that one of the things is more kind of a complex battle is something that people are looking for, increasingly looking for, and just deeper story is what they wanted, and so yeah, we polled our community, and that was one area that we felt we could do a lot better. And we ended up not just reprinting the first game, we ended up revising the first game and turning it into a second edition because there were enough things that we found, like a fifth player. We learned how to play a fifth player and fourth player more quickly with simultaneous play, and other things like that. We revamped the story to bring it to the level of our skill. Now we redid cards that were like slightly like that didn't match our kind of more exact understanding of our own rules. Like certain cards that say once per round, other cards just don't say once per round, but are assumed to be once per round. It's like, okay, we needed to fix that, and a bunch of other elements, but our players really valued that. But even beyond that, I think the vision that I had for our company was that our product should always be subject to change, subject to improvement. Even if we designed one, a game that I could have literally reprinted and made no changes and it would have been well received. I feel like if I see things that I have the opportunity to change, like the rule book, it's getting reprinted, so might as well, make updates to it if I can solve some of the questions that people had, or some of the bumps that people had trying to, or like on the road of trying to learn the game. I should take the opportunity to do that, right? And so it was, I guess in that sense, it was kind of an opportunity for me to take a pit stop, to look back at how people received the game, what people thought about the product, where people thought the various shortcomings were, and try to address them. And so I think that that's going to be very successful for the long-term health of the the IP or the brand. And so that was kind of how I decided to handle that. But yeah, I think that the next kind of the next things that we do in the Deliverance line, I can't just make another expansion with more content in the exact same way, because Deliverance is a 5.5 inch tall box, and the expansion is also 5.5 inches tall, a foot in like a foot square. And so you're going to be, it's like a one cubed foot of space is going to be, taken up with these two games. If I come up with another one that's exactly like that, it's like, well, this is really a lot of stuff. And I don't know if people will, there's one game that actually I know of that we marketed and everything. Or no, we didn't market it, but we marketed other games for this company. And it was like a trilogy dungeon crawler. So you had to have 3 boxes opened because you may need components from each box at the same time. And I just think that that's crazy. If I made another expansion that required the base game and the first expansion, I think I've talked about this on the podcast before about what a terrible idea that is. You can only sell it to people who have purchased your first 2 games, and that audience is rather small. So you have to have like a massive number of sales in order to do something like that, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, understanding what your customers find valuable is, I think, crucial to the growth of your business. So to go back to Blizzard as just an example, because it's such a big, iconic games company, but they'd spent all this time developing StarCraft 2, which in the pro scene they don't even play or even use, but they spent all this money developing this game, and they eventually launched it. And they made more money in selling a celestial steed on World of Warcraft, which is a reskin of a mount. They made more money on that one skin change than they did developing the entire, selling all the sales for StarCraft 2. So that shows you that they were sort of developing something that nobody really wanted. Maybe some people wanted, like the kind of professional StarCraft people, but that's such a small niche community compared to their other ventures that literally selling a single mount made more money than there's other things. So I think that maybe it gets to that your fan base can change over time, especially if you start diversifying your product lines, where StarCraft, which is a very different product to World of Warcraft, which is an MMO, they're going to attract different audiences with different sort of enthusiasm, different abilities to spend money and pay for things. So something to keep in mind that, you might have a very chunky, heavy game, but you might make more money selling a smaller product. Like I was talking to one of our clients recently. They're a games company, but they make most of their money selling puzzles. And they have these puzzles that they sell, and that's like 30% of their annual income is just selling these puzzles. And it's not even something that they kind of went out to create, as they wanted to create board games, but they just landed up having this really successful product, and that's what they kind of lean into.
Yeah. And part of, I think, the concept of the pit stop is like, why am I doing this? And so the conversation that I had yesterday with our team, and I've had this kind of conversation with my wife, who helps me decide kind of where I go, what I do, why am I doing what I'm doing. She's like my therapist in some ways, and I think that the key for us is to figure out like what, like, I have these multiple ventures that I'm on. I've got hobbies that I like and other things too. And like, why am I doing all of the things that I am? I feel like I have to be obligated to do these things. Like I have a lot of things that block up, that require time in my life. I have soon to be 8 children. I've got, of course, my wonderful wife. I've got the Crowdfunding Nerds and Next Level Web, which are the same business, but kind of 2 separate, one focuses on like small businesses and the other one is all about crowdfunding and e-commerce and whatnot. And then I have Deliverance, which is significant, low end games, which is significant time and effort. And then I have staff for those things. And then I have jujitsu, which is a big passion of mine. And I like to play board games as well. I like those types of things. And so each one of those things, they need to justify their existence to remain in, and obviously some justify
you have
themselves.
Other things as well, because you have church, and then you also have the Faith Side podcast that you've been doing with Sam Healy. So there's another 2 extra things to put on your plate. You have so many things, you can't even number them all.
Well, so each one of those, each one of those needs a purpose in order for it to justify itself. And I think some things don't need to justify themselves, or they, like children and, family, right? I mean, it's weird when you talk about it like that needs to justify itself for me to keep it. But it's more like the extracurriculars or even the businesses, like how do the businesses work to accomplish whatever it is that I personally am driven to do. And one of the things that I love so much, it's just like the best game ever, is taking on a new client and figuring out how to market for them and that kind of thing. It's just like it does something for me. It's like activating a part of my brain, like somebody would play chess, and it activates that side of their brain for them. But I think that given that, for myself, you have the marketing business, which is important because that keeps the lights on. It keeps everybody's, for everybody on the whole team, and food on our tables and whatnot, allows us to earn income. And then for me, Low End Games and Deliverance in particular, it's more of an ideological, I want this to exist. I wish that if I were just a gamer, it is something that I wish that I felt like needed to exist, and that there were other people like me that were out there that felt that way. And so Low End Games for me is not just a company that makes a game that I was passionate about, but I feel like if I make a second game, which we're working on additional products, if I make anything, I feel like I have to feel like it needs to exist in order for me to justify spending time on it. I think that a game that just makes money is not something that needs to exist, because I already have a business that if I just focused on the marketing business more, that could make more money because it's better set up. It's like less question marks going on, less unknowns, right? And it's more stable. It's been worked. We worked on it a long time. So when I work on a publishing project, a board game, then that really has to be something that I just needed to see enter into the world. It was like a passion of mine, regardless of how much money it makes. Even though the money it makes is important, it's like if I had a game that I was not passionate about, I made $500,000 versus a game that I was very passionate about, and it made $250,000, I would take the $250,000 and the very passionate game, because first of all, I actually see the game that you're passionate about is oftentimes the thing that makes the most money, because you're passionate about it. You can communicate that passion and that kind of thing. But so I guess my analogy, I don't really think holds water when you bring it into like the real world.
We tend to see that with musicians, don't you? They've got their first album that's usually the kind of gritty, angsty one, and then they get successful, and then the second one's are really polished, and then the third one they've made so much money that they don't care anymore, so that the third one's usually the one that where they start going downhill. But you kind of see this even with films. Like the first one's pretty good and the second one's really good, and then the third one's like, oh, this was just a cash grab. So I think that this is kind of the kind of trend of creative endeavors, is that the first one you learn lots, the second one is the really polished one where everything kind of aligns, and then the third one is kind of you've made so much money now you don't even care.
Yeah. Also I will say that sometimes I think people really get in their own way by the band Creed. Creed was kind of like that, where they came out with this song called Higher. It's like, can you take me higher? And it was very popular, and there a lot of them were Christians. I know the lead singer was, so I think they some of them were not, but were they everybody was asking them. I don't know.
That's a joke. Creed Baptist.
Yeah, non-denominational really means Baptist. So the a lot of interviewers would constantly ask them, because these songs that they wrote on the album called Human Clay were very they were very much about like a Christian trying to live their life, or about songs about God, like the song Higher was about going to heaven, right? And so they would constantly say, no, that's not who we are. That we're not a Christian band. Like we make some Christian songs, but we're not a Christian band. And their fans were like, yeah, you are. I'm reading your lyrics. Like, I'm the one memorizing your songs. Like, yeah, you are. And then they came out with another album that was kind of the Human Clay was like the height, and then it just kind of started going downhill with their next album, and then it totally fell off after that, and nobody cared about them. They were like, okay, it just feels like, to me, as a former fan of Creed or fan of Creed's old stuff, feels like they refused to embrace who they were, the sound that they had as a band, and the like the audience they had, because I think they wanted to be all things. They wanted to keep themselves like, well, we could do other things, and so we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves. But I actually think that in that case, I'm just using that as one example. If you just embraced who you are, if Creed just embraced who they were, I feel like they would have done a whole lot better and been relevant for a whole lot longer. And you see examples of bands that kind of fall out, and then they're like, wait, we're going to get back to our roots. Like, that's not who we are. This is who we are. And they experience like a big resurgence of popularity. And so I see that in creators where sometimes people are like, oh, we just need to make another game. Now that we came out with the first game, we have to come out with another one, because that's what board game companies do. And they just kind of take the first product and they're like, all right, they convince themselves this is a great product, and I'm just going to run with this one. And then, they experience the social signals of people not embracing their next product, and then they wonder why, when they go to launch, that it wasn't very successful, or wasn't successful like they needed it to be, or they hoped it would be. It didn't meet the success of their first game, even though they are more established. They threw more money at it, and that kind of thing. And I'll use an example from my own company. We were working on, for a very long time, I've been working on a product called Angelcraft. It's codenamed Angelcraft because it's kind of like a Warcraft 3 RTS with, mixed in with Deliverance. So you've got like, heroes and other things moving around and punching things, and being awesome and leveling up and whatnot, but in like a Warcraft 3 or StarCraft 2 type setting. And I've been working on this for a long time, and it actually was very, very fun when it was competitive. So we had this competitive version that was really interesting. We had a map that was kind of like a MOBA, like League of Legends or Dota, but not really. Like back in the day in Warcraft 3 or even StarCraft 1 and 2, you would have maps that were somewhat asymmetrical, but very well known and understood to the players, where they're like, okay, I'm in the north position or I'm in the south position. They have a build order and a plan for their first expansion, where that building is going and whatever, because they know the map very well. So my thought was, if we have like one map that everybody plays, they're going to like that a lot better than if it was, variable with tiles that could move around and whatever. And I had all these great ideas, but my big mistake was that the game is competitive. So, and the reason I knew that was because I polled my audience, to try to poll them at the end of every project, that, to ask them about what they would like to see, what they liked about, the game after the game releases. We'll pull them again. What they enjoyed about the game, what they would like to see next time, or, that kind of thing. And I asked about our company. So we do a big survey, and I asked about like, what, the next game that we release, should it be competitive, cooperative? Could it be both? Whatever. And there were like 85% of our audience wanted cooperative games. And there were like, over maybe it was like 500 to 700 people that filled the survey out. So it was like, at the time, about maybe like 10% of our audience actually gave us their full thought, which is a huge sample size. And so if 85% of them wanted cooperative, and only it was like 10 to 15% were interested in a primarily competitive game, if I made a competitive game first, it's a huge mistake for my company. Huge mistake. It would be like building an entirely separate audience, that the first audience that I spent all this time, effort, energy building, not only with emails and Facebook ads and whatnot, but like with the actual product that makes my company, that those people wouldn't be excited about the next product I made, because it was competitive. If they all wanted cooperative, then why am I not focusing cooperative first? And I had this moment where it was like, man, we're making this really, really fun thing that we need to scrap the whole thing. We need to rip the engine out and make it cooperative first. And if it has a competitive mode, that's great. But the primary reason people will buy this is because it's cooperative. And so that was one of those moments we took a pit stop in our company. It was like, holy cow, we are making a big mistake by continuing development on this. And it's like, we were all running in the same direction. I have 2 full-time staff members on the low end games side, in addition to myself. So we're all running in the same direction hard. We are being awesome. We're making art. We're doing all sorts of stuff. And then we realized we're running headlong in the wrong direction. And so we needed to, it would have been better if we just walked instead of ran so hard, and so we have to turn around and we realize we're not even going toward our goal. Like, we have to reorient ourselves, and that means changing our product, so was a little bit of a hard moment for us, where we kind of lost, maybe 2 months of development time on something else that we could have been working on. And we had a really fun game that will never see the light of day, or, in that form. And so, but in the end, it's by far for the best. It's going to end up, the things that we say no to, I think, are far more important than the things we say yes to, because if we say yes to something we should have said no, it means that we're going in the wrong direction, and it's going to take longer to reach success, whatever that looks like for us.
Hey, crowdfunding nerds, if you're looking for an awesome fulfillment partner for US shipping, you should really consider Bridge Distribution and Fulfillment. I personally use them. I've used them for multiple projects. They do such a great job. They also can fulfill Amazon orders and get you prepped for Amazon and their warehousing team. I have been so happy using Bridge Distribution. I'm really proud that they're sponsoring us. If you reach out, bridgedist.com, that's bridgedist.com, let them know we sent you. All right, now back to the show.
You see with a lot of games companies, like let's say Valve, or even go back to Blizzard, they have StarCraft and they have Warcraft. They're very similar. Just they're basically slight differences with basically new skins or new themes. And so see this the same with Valve, where they have their Half-Life series, which is a single player, first person, sci-fi sort of thriller. And then they have Portal, which is also a first person, but this is a puzzle game. So it's still first person, still single player, but it's got a twist in that it's cooperative. And I know a lot of their games actually came out of their modding community. It was people who played Half-Life they created like a PvP mode, a competitive mode, which then turned into Counter-Strike. And even Team Fortress 2 came out of a Half-Life mod. So it was the modding community. It was their own customers that, took their games, who were kind of modifying it. And they're like, oh, that would make a good idea for a game. They continued to develop what the community was already interested in. So I think, how does this translate to the board game industry? I suppose the only way you can do this as surveys, and then see how your customers are using your products. Are they homebrewing a certain version of your games? Like, well, actually, why don't we just continue that homebrew? We'll create our own version. So I think that's something to keep in mind with your games as you develop a fan base, as you have people who actually care about your games. Then use them to kind of inspire your development moving forward, because this is what some of the best video game companies in the world have done. And the proof is in the pudding.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's super true. Now, another area that I think is really worth kind of sitting and thinking about it, especially, even if you don't have a product that you've released yet, but is with kind of, so you look at your single project that you're working on, that you're very, very passionate about, and that you want to see exist into the world. You may not understand all of the reasons why you want it to exist, but there's this feeling that's bubbling up from the inside that's like, I need this to exist. You need to consider the products before launch, the kind of the plans before launch, the plans during launch, and then after launch, after your Kickstarter is over, what you're going to do with this. And I think that a lot of creators are like, okay, I'm working on the product. It's got to be developed. It's got to be solid. It's got to be a really great gameplay experience that people want. and all of that. Then the next thing is like, okay, now we have to market it. And then, we launch our Kickstarter. It's got to be successful. That Kickstarter is going to determine a lot for us. And then the rest is like down the road. And I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that people make, when I remember like before I launched my first Kickstarter, I was like, man, I see people making $150,000. I'm like, wow, that's a lot. I wish I could make $150,000. I'm seeing these projects launch, and then, I make 300,000 or, 314. And it's like, dang, I just saw another project make like 500. And it's like, I'm kind of like sad panda about that. But dude, I made over $300,000. Holy crap. I did this. And then that money that was a lot of money that, was like 280,000 or whatever was deposited into my account. And I just was like, I don't know. I just felt like, now it's time to actually do work. I was paid. I'm not going to get paid anymore. I mean, we did have our post, our pledge manager and whatnot, but that eventually came out. But it was like, now I need to actually make this. And when that moment strikes, hit me about a week after Kickstarter ended for our first product. It was like, okay, now I have to actually work and make this happen. And that moment, that transition, I couldn't afford time to think and to take a pit stop and to like, consider where I'm at and where I want to go. Like, I've locked myself in. I'm now on rails moving down a track. There's only one way forward, and that is to deliver something that I promised on Kickstarter to the backers, and, with the money that they entrusted me with. And so it became all about making and finishing the thing that I was making and delivering it. I didn't really have time to think about how I would sell this after crowdfunding. I just assumed that people would buy the thing because if it was successful, crowdfunding, people would buy it, in whatever post market that I had. And, and it was like my web store. I'll find a distributor. I'll sell it on Amazon. It'll be easy. It's like very, I didn't think about it nearly as much as I probably should have. And thankfully, having the team that we have and the work that we doing the work that we do, it was kind of forced upon me to think about how am I going to sell this? Because we've seen lots of products that did really well on crowdfunding that really struggled to find their market afterward. And a lot of the time, these are people that before they even come to us. So while I don't feel comfortable actually naming the particular clients, because I haven't asked them for their permission, we've had clients that have come to us that have sold, a ton of their base game. And they're like, I think all of the people who wanted to buy this have bought it. We've really struggled selling, because they make, millions and millions of dollars during their crowdfunding campaign. They're like, well, all the people who really wanted this have it now. We've sold 100,000 copies of whatever. And so then they come to us and it's our job to find a path forward to sell their product. And we think it's an amazing product. It's something that people clearly loved, but it's not selling very well because they've already sold a ton of units. So how then can we start selling this? And we've had some really interesting times with these clients where we found a path forward, but it would have been so much better for that client if they had sort of considered, we've sold this many units to these backers, because I can tell you crowdfunding backers represent 5% of the people that you can sell to. And sometimes you can bleed into the, like Brandon Sanderson and his books. There were a lot of people that were not on Kickstarter before, or like the Cyberpunk TCG. I want to say like half of all those people were not had never backed a product on Kickstarter before. And so you can pull people in for the first time, but there are, and so maybe the percentage is larger for you. So instead of 5% of all potential backers, it could be 10% of all your potential backers. But when you sell, 10,000 units through crowdfunding or 50,000 units through crowdfunding, there are 10 times or 20 times that many people outside. The trick is reaching them. And if you don't have understanding of where those people shop, then or how they shop or how to reach them, you're going to really struggle post campaign, and you're going to have 5,000 units of your product in a storage area that costs you money every month, and you're going to be like, I'm moving 10 products a week, and that's not enough, So I think that it's a very wise idea. I would recommend to you to consider, how will I sell after crowdfunding, and where are the people that will buy that are not on crowdfunding, but that are that are out there and interested. So people that shop at like their local game store, there are a lot of those people. People that shop only on Amazon, people that shop via like after they get a recommendation on social media, or people that only look for recommendations from their friends or whatever. Those are all sorts of different possibilities. But how can you access those people? Because you can't do it the same way you did, not for everybody through crowdfunding, but I'll say for myself, for Deliverance, one thing that was very helpful is just to understand the type of fan that is attracted to Deliverance. If I know how to talk to people, all I have to do is find different mediums, like different, if it's Facebook ads, if it's Google, if it's YouTube, if it's, renting someone's email list and sending an email to the Babylon Bee email subscribers, or getting an article on BibleGateway.com. I mean, I just need to be able to speak the right words that I understand that my fans really resonate with, and do it in different places, and make sure that those places are places that my fans go. So that's something that you need to think about, even if you're not going to be able to leverage that via crowdfunding, because they're not going to back a product on Kickstarter, but they will buy it if it was on your website, or if they'll buy it if it was on Amazon. That's something that you really need to have prepared, so that whether I market the product for you, or Sean does, or you market for yourself, this language is what resonates with my people, and these places are where my people go. So I'm going to market, I'm going to send games to these reviewers, because my people go and watch reviews from those places, etc.
So maybe to come back to the kind of overall idea of this discussion, in terms of thinking about where you want to take your business in the future, is this something that you came to a conclusion? I know we talked about you had all these different responsibilities, but I suppose in terms of focusing and having, I suppose we're thinking about it as long-term goals. So what is the long-term goals of your company? Is that something that you were able to sort of come to a conclusion with?
Yeah. And, some of it is just like a continuing conversation. So there are really, I'll say we could talk about two separate businesses, right? Like my publishing business and our marketing business. And for the publishing company, we decided, we can really only work on like 2 campaigns per year at this point. One of them has to be Deliverance, because Deliverance is the core of our product line. We have to have something that comes out every year for people to enjoy Deliverance, to like content wise. We also have to have something that everybody really enjoys, as far as like content that's ongoing. Like why we need to give people a reason to take Deliverance off their shelf and play it. So that's really important, and that has to be priority 1 in our company. So then what can we do in addition to that? That's very limited. So with Deliverance, we kind of have it down to a science, if you will. That takes up half of our bandwidth. So the other half can only be devoted really to like one additional product. And what is that going to be? What product is that? And so, we wouldn't be able to work effectively on like 3 games at the same time. If we got a game that was pretty good that needed some development, it would take us like maybe 2 years to release it because of the things we're working on. So now I kind of have this understanding of how the company operates and what, how fast we can go. We work on big games. Like if we worked on like a card game, just cards only, I mean, we could have that ready in 6 months or something. But like the games that, again, we want to see enter into the world that we just wished existed, are typically bigger games. So that's kind of our capacity. So the game that we're working on, so Deliverance is a given. Like we need to work on that. We have plans. We have like several different products we're working on. We have ongoing things for Deliverance that we're working on, like the Deliverance raid that people can have like a community event where they all get together and play, and then we have quarterly content that we release that's free that everybody can download and whatnot. And then we'll go to conventions and do those things with people. We'll play like a quarterly scenario or give or do a raid with everybody. And then for the other product, we're working on Angelcraft as kind of the big one that we're working on internally. And but we have others that we're testing. So we'll devote we're planning on devoting like 3 weeks to testing like versions of Angelcraft, where we're going to test it as a sort of a deck building effort, where you command kind of like your forces in a manner like Spirit Island, or we've got a version that's more tactical combat, dudes on a hex grid, punching out bad guys, and then other versions of that. So we're like planning on very focused tests with that product to see which direction are we going to go, and then we're just going to sail headlong with that product. And then on the other side, on the marketing business, it's kind of more fun because I feel like we have, as a team, like when we met together, we just got to fellowship a lot and whatnot. I feel like we're all moving together in the same direction, working kind of in the same, toward the goal already. So I just think we need more of what it is that we're currently doing. We need more, like, how can we get, like we talk regularly about, like, how can we become more efficient? Because you can really only take on so many projects at a time. Like if I'm marketing 20 different clients at once, like it starts to get really difficult because I have a lot of initiatives going on at the same time, and I want to do a really good job. I want to deliver great customer service. So we have to expand the team. And also the team that we have to spread our initiatives out in a manner that it kind of balances everything between team members so that we all have kind of mental capacity to work with the clients that we have. And so, I think what we're doing now is working really well. Clients really like it. People stick with us for Kickstarter pre-marketing, and they stay with us for Pledge Manager marketing, and then they stay with us for e-commerce marketing after that. And so the company is growing for that reason. We've got like the SEO marketing side is growing as well. And so steady, stable growth, I think is a key for us, rather than like rapid, let's bring on 100 clients more and let's do a bunch of marketing and get tons and tons of clients in. I think that is a more dangerous thing. Like if suddenly 20 clients that all needed e-commerce came in the same week, we would have a really tough time with that. We would be dropping the ball, right? Given the team size that we have, like we couldn't grow that fast. It would be very dangerous. But we're kind of building, like we certainly our capacity for taking on clients. Like we had, I don't know, like a year ago, if we had 5 clients coming in the same week, that would have been scary, or I don't know, maybe that's like was our limit a year ago. But now, like we have 5 clients come in a week. That's like we're prepared, we're ready and capable. Like that happens all the time. So I feel like our capacity is increased, but where I'd like to go is I'd like to eventually recruit another staff member. And so I don't know if you're listening to this and you're like, I'd love to work with the Crowdfunding Nerds team. It's something that I always like to recruit people by like to the team by having a vision of like this is where we want to grow and who is interested in growing with us in this way. So we're looking for people that can manage ads and work on clients and I love when people have board game publishing experience and whatnot. So if that's you, then maybe we're not hiring right now, but as we continue to grow, the way that we free up our capacity is to expand the team. And the last time we did that was a year ago, probably, right? Maybe more. I don't know. I mean, we've definitely expanded hours of team members. So like, but so I think we're at like the full amount of hours that we can possibly be at right now. But yeah, so I don't know. That's where I see it. What about you, Sean? What do you think?
In terms of expanding the team, or
yeah, or like how do you see us growing, or where do you see us going?
Yeah, before we expand the team, I always wanted, because we have a weekly staff review and meeting that we discuss, we always want to make sure that we're all sort of at capacity, that there aren't any, we don't want to bring another person if there's somebody who could actually take on more workload. So that's something we want to make sure that we are optimizing our current staff efficiently, where they feel like, I feel like I've got a good amount of workload. I'm able to do it efficiently, but it's busy enough. I'm not just sort of twiddling my thumbs waiting for work to come in before we start expanding. But yeah, I think growing Crowdfunding Nerds, I don't see why not. I think my goal is to try and expand and to help our clients. And I do sort of see Crowdfunding Nerds growing, and I hope it does grow. I think it would be great if we could be, the marketing company for people when they think of tabletop games publishing or even games publishing, not because of we have so much experience doing this, but also because we do it ourselves. We publish our own games through Low End Games, and many on the team have developed, are actively developing their own projects or have. So that's something to, I think that makes us really unique, being able to understand our clients' position in terms of their thoughts and struggles. And then also our network. We're able to kind of connect our clients with our network because we've worked with so many different people in the industry that we can sort of vouch for and vet. So yeah, I don't see why that would never be valuable. So I think I can only see continual growth, and I think it's something that we should pay attention to, not just, I think it's easy to get complacent, right? Things are going well and you can say, oh, well, things are going well, we just do the same old. But I think we constantly need to think of, well, how can we improve the service for our customers? How can we expand? How can we become better at our craft? How can we become better marketers? Constantly trying to read books to better understand human behavior, because essentially what marketing is. Different marketing books, even books on history. I think history is a great way to kind of understand how people behave and think. And humans don't seem to change. So if if people do things in the past, they're probably going to do it in the future. So I think that's all important. So yeah, I'd like to expand and see the company grow.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. One thing that I always look at just as an entrepreneur is, how do my staff kind of see the company, and do they see potential for growth and increased wages and whatnot? And one of the things that I saw from the way that we how we were all together and what we were talking about when we were together, it feels like everybody sees the company growing in the future, and everybody's kind of very excited to be a part of it. And I love that. Like I never want it to feel like, oh, this is now kind of at its capacity. Andrew is happy with how much money he's making, and so I'm not gonna be any happier with the money I'm making beyond what I have today. That's a really terrible feeling, probably. And I think that growth is one of my obligations to you guys as my team, to make sure that, and of course it's not just me that it lends to this, but I think all of us trying to grow the company means that all of us should benefit, right? And And so the fact that everybody sees the potential in that is a very exciting thing to me, just as I don't know, somebody who gets to be a part of this, and not just like the business owner, but I feel, like I get to be a meaningful part of everybody's excitement and growth and, in their own personal lives, and I think that one of the things that I always kind of look at, our marketing business, it's a corporation that could easily just be this heartless monster that consumes money from clients and spits out revenue for its shareholders, and I don't want to be like that. So every project that we take on, it's like, this is as if it were my project that I'm personally working on, and everybody has that mindset. And I think that is one of the reasons that we are growing. And it's kind of like classic Blizzard, like to bring it back to Blizzard. Classic Blizzard was so awesome because they made something that they wanted to play. And it really felt like they were just fellow fans of the products that they were leading development of. So things like Diablo, StarCraft, Warcraft, Orcs and Humans. And, I was a part of like all of those things because I'm like, I have no idea what this is other than Blizzard made it. And I really, really liked the other games that I played by Blizzard. So I'm just going to buy whatever it is because Blizzard made it. And they had so many hits in a row that it felt like, man, these people really have passion for what it is they're working on. And it made me want to be a part of it. And so I was in World of Warcraft. I was like, who would ever pay monthly to play a game at the time? It's like, that's a stupid idea. It's like, but Blizzard made it, so I got to try it. And of course I got hooked for, 11 years or whatever it was. So, I think that's an important thing to consider is the raw passion that you have for what it is that you're doing. And I think that our staff, it's part of it is like bringing on the right people. I think if we weren't all nerds, like we were playing, like we played Galactic Cruise, we played Nimble RPG, we played Agatha Christie's Death on the Cards by Modifius, we played a bunch of other client games, and that was really fun. So that was one thing that we got to do when we were together is just enjoy our clients' games. But it really feels like we're all kind of gamers at heart and have in some ways like a bleeding heart for the clients. So it was cool. So anyway, so I don't know if you have any final thoughts.
No, I suppose for our next goal is instead of having just staff retreat, we'd bring families as well. So that's the next kind of goal as we grow the business. bring families and extended family. Have a big
the Crowdfunding Nerds cruise.
Yeah, Crowdfunding Nerds conference or something. I don't know.
Yeah, Dice Tower does a cruise. Maybe we could do a Crowdfunding Nerds cruise. That'd be cool. We'll bring all of our clients, say like, you guys get all expenses paid because we're billionaires now.
Yeah.
So given the track record of when billionaires bring people on cruises, it's probably going to turn into murder mystery though.
Yeah, well,
so who was in cabin 10, the lady. Anyway, so I don't know if you understand that, but it was a fun movie
with the shrimp.
Yeah. All right. Well, so hope you guys enjoyed this podcast about pit stopping. Hopefully you guys will take the advice of taking a break, looking at where you are going, making sure that is in alignment with what your fans want, and that is in alignment with where you want to take your own life. So, I don't know. Hopefully it was a good podcast to sit and reflect. We're going to be back next week with more, actual, getting into the mid-campaign slump on Kickstarter, and we'll see you nerds on the next episode. Later.
But before you go, you should download the Tabletop app. So do that.
Tabletone. Dude, we were using that for like every game Nimble. That we played.
Yeah.
We used that for Nimble. We used that for Dead of Winter. We used that for, like every game that Donnie was involved in, he had Nimble going. It was fun.
Yeah.
So anyway. All right. Now later.
Goodbye.
Hey, crowdfunding nerds, it's Andrew Lowen, and I wanted to introduce you guys to the Crowdfunding Nerds Academy. If you don't know, we have a do-it-yourself course system that will teach you how to build, excite, and prepare a crowd to fund you on your launch day, and that is our goal. I have used these systems to help raise over $30 million for tabletop campaigns, over 200 tabletop crowdfunding campaigns since 2019. I've generated over $100 million through e-commerce sales using these processes. These courses teach you how to replicate our results. They're made for the small creator. Over 150 of those people were first-time creators. These courses contain hundreds of hours of podcast discussions and tons of details that are almost impossible to find on the internet. And they have been distilled into concentrated courses that you can absorb quickly. They are designed to generate results. We hold nothing back. Visit crowdfundingnerds.com/academy to learn more, or just Google search Crowdfunding Nerds Academy.